Hey, folks, welcome back to another episode of Broken Brains with yours truly, Bruce Parkman, sponsored by the Mac Parkman Foundation. Our show is focused on the issue of repetitive brain trauma in the forms of repetitive head impacts from contact sports and repetitive blast injuries for our veterans, and how these injuries are affecting our veterans, our kids, our adult populations, and how we as a society don't know much about the damage that this is causing and why we need the change. So every week we find the most amazing set of podcast guests out there that we bring on the show to educate you, because our doctors, our nurses, our psychiatrists are not informed. And our veteran administrators, our medical care professionals for the VA are not informed of this issue. And you must be educated in order to best protect you and the ones you love. Today, we have another exciting guest on our show, Ms. Ashton Kroner. She served in the Marine Corps as a field radio operator. During her tour, she deployed in 2009 in support of OIF and received orders as a lioness attached for 1st Battalion, 8th Marines at Al Taqaddum Air Base. In 2011, she redeployed to Camp Leatherneck in support of OEF with the 8th Communications Battalion. And then for 2012 and 2015, she had the hardest job in the military, which is a recruiter. During her time in service, she unfortunately suffered multiple traumatic brain injuries and chronic PTSD that she's dealt with for years. And she spent a significant part of her post-military career dealing with PTSD and finding her path to recovery and into a full life. And she's been through the Leon J. Haley Brain Wellness Program, or she's part of it right now, where she focuses on these challenges. So she has turned her service into service for her fellow veteran operators in order to help them regain their quality of life. She's completed a bachelor's degree from Purdue University, graduating summa cum laude, congratulations, in July 2018, and got her MBA from Purdue in 2021. No small achievements right there. And she worked at a Road Home program as outreach manager prior to joining the Haley Brain Wellness Program. And she's now the Associate Director of Development at the University of Florida Health Leon J. Haley Brain Wellness Program, which is where she spends a lot of her time giving up. And she volunteers her time with the Marine Corps League. Now, I've told my producer, I don't want any more Marines on this darn show, but he keeps telling me, he keeps finding you guys. And of course, we've known each other for a long time. Yeah. And Ashton, honestly, since I've known you and I've met you at so many events and understanding, your commitment to our veteran corps is unbelievable. And taking what you have gone through and turning that into servicing our veterans and that just selfless love that comes out of you is awesome. So, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about these TBIs that unfortunately got you on this program.
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me. I always like being able to spend time with you and, hearing about all the things that you've been up to. But a little bit about me. I mean, I did serve, obviously 8 years in the Marine Corps. You did a wonderful job recapping, my life. But I served 8 years in the Marine Corps. I grew up in, in small town Texas, kind of jumped around a little bit. But, I always knew that I was going to serve the military in some sort of, capacity. Of course, back then I was wanting to do infantry, and infantry wasn't allowed, for females. I wanted to be, where all the action was. But, almost didn't join the military because I had 2 head injuries prior to even joining. One of them, probably more extreme, was actually an equine accident where I got kicked in the back of my head. So that almost ended, my ability to serve right then and there. But luckily I was able to, kind of move past that. Senior year of high school, diving accident, swimming and diving team. So I had, my second head injury and, with that, and, some of the common symptoms that that you see and that you kind of advocate for, Bruce, like that line sensitivity, poor concentration, those type of things really kind of started impacting me then and there, but I knew I was still going to serve. So senior year, I enlisted into my beloved Marine Corps, which 249, years this year. Really excited about next year's celebration.
Happy birthday! And nobody's proud of their birthday. We can't even I don't even know what the Army birthday is. That's tragic, man. We don't even have Army balls. What you guys do with your birthday is through the roof, and I do respect it so much.
Oh, it's great. We always try to sit there and bring in the other branches so they get a small taste of what it's like to really celebrate. So I might have to invite you next year to one of our ceremonies.
Yeah, man, all
Yep.
about it. I've been teaching Marines and Navy SEALs how to drink for 35 years. So,
You
I'm out
can't,
of
I mean,
practice right
we
now,
were
but
born in
I'll.
a bar, Marine Corps, we were born in a bar. You can't not.
Right? Yeah. No, I love
But
it.
yeah. But yeah, no, throughout my military, my military experience, like I said, I did a lot of, really cool things, starting from my first deployment, getting to volunteer as Team Lioness, which for those that don't know, that's where you actually get partnered up with a infantry unit or, a soft unit to be able to, really gather, intel information and talk to the locals, that are in country. And so I did that for a short time. And then, went back to my parent command. Whenever I actually came back from my first deployment, we started doing training exercises, gearing up for Afghanistan. And I was put into one of those Humvee rollover simulations, and somebody lost control of the rifle, whacked me, side of the head, which is always a good feeling. Um, it's interesting about the military though, and I know for those that have served, you always kind of hear those words malingering and suck it up and all those things. And so I was really worried about how that would impact my military career. And so I was sitting there utilizing really a lot of self-medication, in regards to, kind of treating, my head injury, and it wasn't working. I mean, military, they would sit there and prescribe you those 800 milligrams of ibuprofen and everything. And I was taking three or
Ranger
four of
candy
those.
is what we call them. Yeah. Those big
Absolutely. I was sitting
Motrin
there
pills.
taking like
Oh,
three or
yeah.
four of those at a time, going well past the dosage, just to be able to see straight again. But yeah, so I mean, did the workup for Afghanistan, deployed to Afghanistan. Really great experience. There, all things considering, I mean, again, learning from a different country is always exciting, but got bored, started doing my mixed martial arts, trying to get my black belt, and got shoulder thrown across the room. Another training accident, which honestly, like all my head injuries seem to be more accidents than actual like big catastrophic things that you see in the movies. So but yeah, so I mean, after getting out of the military, I mean, I struggled. I mean, I think a lot of stories that I encounter are people struggling, silently struggling at that. And so, for me, I really wanted to be able to, once I got past my initial issues, got diagnosed with PTSD and my TBI, I started getting help. It's like I wanted to be able to help others, and that's exactly, kind of what drove me into the work that I'm doing now. Is me, it's all about prevention versus intervention, because it came down to the point where I almost needed intervention to be able to help get me back on my feet in a good place. So I want to be able to do the same thing for others.
So tell us about, back then, because, I talked to a lot of vets. And actually, I was just at a closed session on brain health with the military. And, the stigma keeps coming up. Like you talk about, getting, your TBIs from, training. And regardless how you get them in the military, when you get them, the military kind of owns these, because you wouldn't have been in a Humvee rollover, and you wouldn't be trying to get your black belt, because you got to stay sane in these combat zones, because otherwise you just eat, because there's food everywhere, right? And you're
Yes.
working out or you're on mission, right? But you talk about not wanting to talk about your head injury. So talk about the stigma and what it is about the military, because I've lived it. You don't talk about when your ankle's twisted. You don't talk about anything, man, that could show weakness, right? And especially when it comes from up here, because then you
Mhm.
start looking at not being able to do your job, and the military takes it weird. So back then, which was not a long time ago, but it was still a different in military than it is now when it looks at mental health. What were your challenges, understanding that, hey man, I've got, I've had 2 TBIs, pretty severe ones, whatever your symptoms were, but I'm just going to suck it up. Why didn't you go to your command, so on and so forth?
Well, I think there was a couple of reasons that, at play. One, I was worried about, the stigma surrounding like, my service members, because we had, and I think females specifically have a really hard time, on that, because you have some, at least during my service, you had some females that, were trying to get out of, deploying. And that was never me. I always wanted to go on deployment. I'd sit there and volunteer for everything. And so I was really worried about that stigma of, I'm just going to be a kind of like a deadbeat basically, or a malingerer. I just didn't want to be labeled like that. And it starts with the command, just that toxicity. We would always sit there, and because I was at Camp Lejeune, and so The psych floor, I believe, was on the fourth floor. And so they were like, oh, if you go to the fourth floor, you're going to see the wizard, you'll never come back. And so there's that fear too, like when I wanted to be able to come back, I wanted to be with my unit, I wanted to be able to do all the things, but so I mean, there was that, that worry that it was going to impact my ability to do my job. It was going to impact how others perceive me. And then there was the fact of like, what if this is actually serious, and this could actually just end my military career in general. And so, for me, it was easier just to kind of suck it up and not talk about it. Now, I will say that I know that there are other, that there were others that are around me that were kind of seeing a little bit of shift, especially with my husband. We had been dating at the time. Actually, no, we just got married. And he was starting to see that shift. My parents have been talking about seeing that shift. And so those that were like, that knew me prior to my first deployment versus, now, they got to see that, those start, those start and shifts in my personality and how I was, perceiving things. I was doing things a little bit more riskier than, others, but then I always trepped it up to, well, I'm a Marine, Marines do risky things, we do dumb decisions. So for me, I was always just trying to prove that there was nothing wrong, that I could be just as better, just as good, if not better than, those that I was serving with. And, it seems to always have a competition between the males and the females, to prove who was better. And, like I said, I that's why I, joined Team Lioness and, was volunteering for everything that I could. They just kept on sending me to the desert, every time I volunteered to go on a mule or something. But it was just it was a good experience, but at the same time, I could see how that impacts my health, today. I wish there were things that I'd done differently when I was younger.
And so do you think you would have approached this problem in the same command environment a little bit differently than, because you did say you were medicating, and we all deal with, medication a lot of times to deal with our mental health. And were you ever like diagnosed? Did you ever get a brain scan, or did you just eat it until you got out and then decided to get help? Is that pretty much the course?
So it was interesting. So I think it was in between deployments, like right before I was like deploying to Afghanistan, they actually did a scan and a memory test to see how, kind of like my baseline, which I find really ironic. Because my baseline, prior to my first deployment is really where that should have been happening, or really even before that at MEPS, whenever you go to, enlist, there, that should be a standardized, just because of all the training accidents that occur, to include even going through recruit training. So for me, I think that, kind of looking back on, like my thing, like, like with my first head injury in the military, there was a corpsman on scene, but I was downplaying everything. Again, we're getting ready to do a, deployment. We had already lost, one of our service members, on the first half of the deployment. We were the replacement. And so, I was really worried about, like, oh, people are going to sit there and think that, I don't want to, go because it's a more dangerous, deployment, or just trying to get out of it. And so I sat there and I talked to the corpsman. I'm like, no, I'm fine, despite me being knocked out. I lost consciousness for a few seconds, and, they clearly saw, all the signs were there that I had a concussion, and, they took me at face value, like, all right, patient said they're fine, and kind of left. And I ended up going back a couple of days later, complaining of migraines. And so they gave me ibuprofen, and, I'm sitting there popping that like candy, like Tic Tacs and all that. And, nothing was really happening. And when I was on deployment, again, deployment is very, very different, experience. So, we had a corpsman on scene, for any type of, training, in regards to the mixed martial arts. And so we had somebody on, at least in our unit, that were able to, be there whenever when I got thrown. I got my bell rung a little bit on that one too, because I remember just being dizzy. And I was worried about being sent home, despite me not wanting to be there. I was like, yeah, I'm on deployment, I'm having a good time, but I also miss being home with my family, and that probably would have been my ticket, home. But I was so worried again about that stigma. And so I just, again, I sucked it up until after I got out of the military. And even then, like when I first got out of the military, I didn't go, I didn't claim, PTSD or, TBI, because one, I didn't know what they were. I didn't know what a traumatic brain injury was. I didn't know what post-traumatic stress was. All I know is that if you go and talk to somebody about mental health, you're messed up, and I just, again, I didn't want that label. I was afraid of it. It wasn't until, I was, really starting to see the struggle in my home environment that I was like, if something's going on, and my husband was like, you need to go get help. Like, you need to talk to somebody. Like, you're impacting the family at this point, impacting my daughter and everything. And I was like, all right, fine, I'll go talk to somebody. And that's whenever I had a really great therapist to start off with. And, she refused to even tell me what my label was. She was just working on the trauma, just working on, the things that I was complaining on, going on the symptoms. And, she knew what my diagnosis was, but I didn't know about it for the first year and a half of me getting treatment, because, it's just not something that we talked about, because that made it important for me. It's like, I don't want to have a label associated with my name, knowing in my medical record, I was labeled at that point. But to me, that was big, just being able to work through that.
And how did she treat you? Were you the typical veteran journey down, SSRIs, SSNIs, benzos, and all that, or was it more therapy, or did she prescribe anything out of the box?
Yeah, so I told her right off the bat, the bat, that I did not want any type of medication. I didn't want anything to do with medication. I wanted to keep my, my hormone levels the same. I didn't want to have any issues with, because I know a lot of people were sitting there talking about how tired they felt, or, feeling like they were hungover, and I didn't want any of that. So we actually started off with EMDR, and I wasn't a fan. I told her, I was like, I don't like EMDR. I don't like anything about this. It wasn't working for me. So then we just kind of switched over just to talk therapy, and then it was nice, but I just felt like I was always complaining. I would sit there and use everyday life, like my work, my job, my boss, my husband, my kids, and we always weren't going anywhere. And she was like, you need evidence-based, maybe not EMDR. So she actually did cognitive processing therapy with me to start. And so the CPT, I'm a big fan of, because I and very black and white whenever it comes to getting treated. Either it works or it doesn't work. And, having like that, I used to watch a lot of lawyer shows growing up too. And so that's how she compared CPT with me. She was like, you're basically a lawyer, and you're trying to combat your symptoms, and why you feel the way that you feel, and why that's not your fault. And I really liked that. I was like, okay. So, I was just sitting there always putting a case in my head. And a lot of the times my husband would look at me and he's like, what are you even thinking about? Like, what are your thoughts? And I'm like, I'm having an argument with myself, and trying to process, whatever was going on. And then, after, I would say after about a year or so, she had actually brought up, like some of the symptoms that I've been seeing, like having. She was like, there might be more, going on here. And I had never even brought up that I had had multiple head impacts. I'd never, it was never mentioned any of it. And she was like, have you ever been, diagnosed with assessed for a TBI? And I was like, I don't know what that means. So we started doing the assessments, and, realized pretty quickly that, I just based on my symptoms that, I had a TBI going on. So then, it kind of shifted over to more of like speech language, for, like my memory recall. My memory was garbage back then, still is, but not nearly as bad as it was. And it was, thankfully, because of her, I was able to really get an understanding of what was going on and why it was impacting my family so much.
That's and that's something that, as at least she was trying to explore, some of those different, therapies, and give you a path ahead, because, the usual, option is, here's a bag of drugs, and here's some therapy, and we know that doesn't work. And obviously, let's change, shift now to what you're doing now. You're working with veterans. You're working with their brains, which is amazing, because this is the most unaddressed issue when it comes to mental health, because we're not aware that the brain health, the physical brain health also, it can impact mental health, right? Impact mental illness, and we don't address the brain as an organ. So tell us about the Haley Institute that you're working at right now, and how did you get there? Like, did you just apply for a job and get it? You have a MBA, right? Not actually in the social welfare space. So how did you get over there?
Yeah, so my husband and I, we were actually up in Illinois, and he actually ended up, and he's good now, but he had testicular cancer, and so the weather from going through chemo and everything really was impacting just like how his body regulation was. And so we're like, you know what, we like Florida. Let's just move to Florida. And so I gave my now old boss basically a 4-month notice. And I'm like, hey, I'm leaving in May. I was like, I'll stay for this, but I'll be gone. Like, we're moving to Florida. hottest time of the year really to start moving to Florida. There was really, but anyways, it was great, great opportunity for us. And so, I only applied for 2 jobs actually. One was Wounded Warrior Project, and then the other, I just kind of put in veterans, in the Jacksonville area. So I'm in Jacksonville, Florida, and the TBI Center, came up, and so I started reading a little bit about it. It was a newer program, but it was under the Avalon Action Alliance, which has been around for years now, and it's a collaborative of hospitals that assess and treat military veterans of any era, of any discharge status, regardless if they can pay or not. So very similar to the work that I was doing. And they needed a development officer. And so I hadn't really done too much work in the fundraising, at the time. And so I put my hat in for the ring, and I was like, I've done some fundraising, but not much. Most of my stuff is community outreach on the national level. And so they interviewed me, and I hadn't heard from them, for a few weeks, and I'm like, well, you know what, I don't think I got the job, and I'd already, said no to Wounded Warrior Project, so I was like, we're just going to start our own business. So when we moved here, I'm actually getting ready to sign the papers for our house, to purchase it, and I get a call from my now boss offering me a position. So everything kind of, aligned really well, but my role, my function is to fundraise and, spread awareness for veterans and first responders that are, not really sure what's going on, with their brains, but they have symptoms, some of the same symptoms that I was always sitting there talking about. And, what we do is we take an integrative care, approach to our veterans. So if somebody comes up to me and says, hey, I heard you talk, and, I have some of those symptoms that you were mentioning, but I don't know how to get started. I help them get started into the program. And it just basically goes off of, what their needs are, what their symptoms are. We start off with a 3-day assessment. And what's really unique about it is, the patient is centered, first and foremost. They come in and they talk to our core providers, our speech language pathology, our psychiatrists, our neurologists. I mean, all these doctors are in one room together, which is not a common occurrence in any medical practice. And the patient tells their story one time. They say, either I've had multiple head traumas, or maybe I've had one instance, but these are my symptoms. And then over the next couple of days, they're getting follow-on appointments to get a good understanding of what's going on. And then from there, we make recommendations on, one, what their injury is, and two, how best to treat it. Sometimes we need to have them go back into the community for more tests. Other times, we get them linked right up to our intensive outpatient program. So on top of those core, providers that, they meet with, we also take an integrative therapy approach. So we include acupuncture for pain, mindfulness, art therapy, music therapy. We have canine and equine programming, walking equine program, no riding. But at the same time, they're taking more of that, regular approach that you see in a lot of, either inpatient or intensive outpatient programs, in regards to behavioral health and neurological, health. So there's a lot that's happening during that 3-week time frame. And what we're realizing is that the evidence is showing a reduction, and a drastic reduction in TBI symptoms. So we know the program is working. And I have the honor of being able to, fundraise to make sure that our program is going to continue for years to come.
Now, are you, beyond the therapies that you're doing, what are you doing to address brain health? Are you doing HBOT? You doing TMS? Photobiomodulation? Any of the electronic therapies out there?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, keep going. And I got a follow-on question.
So, all of our stuff is, we have we're very physical therapy focused. And so some of the machines that we're using is our Propria and our Burtec. Our Burtec machine is actually virtual reality, and there's platelets that the individual is, standing on. And so they actually partner really well with speech language pathology on memory retention as well. So you might be driving a car standing on this platelets, and you're harnessed in, of course. And so while the PT, and it's a physical therapy neurologist, so it's or a neurological physical therapist that's working with this, so specifically for the brain. And what they're doing is they're running you through simulations, and then they might be saying, okay, what color was that light that you just, walked, or that you just drove by, so it links in that speech language pathology as well. And we're able to, basically check their vestibular system, and treat their vestibular, so for those that, pass out easy, And actually, quite a few of the individuals that come through our program, don't complain of, vertigo. They're not really complaining of, passing out because we're accustomed, just as humans, to sit there and not put ourselves in situations where, it's going to aggravate those symptoms. Same thing, like you roll your ankle, what are you going to do? You're going to have crutches, you're going to sit there and, basically put your feet off the floor in that sense. People do the same thing for the vestibular system. And so we purposely put them in a system to be able to, I don't want to use the word aggravate, but, basically assess to see, what that looks at. And then with our Proprior machine, again, this is for physical therapy. A lot of people with head injuries, they automatically tense up. And so if you're constantly in that tense or that what we call our hyperaroused state, it's going to be causing a lot of other pain issues, basically from your jawline going all the way down to your toes. And so the Proprio is able, and along with our entire physical therapy team, uses that in order to be able to, treat your, basically relearning how to walk again, how to move, how to stand, how to sit in a correct fashion. So you're not aggravating where it's going all the way up to the pain receptors in your brain. So there's a lot that's happening, in our clinic. But whenever it comes to some of the other treatment, modalities that are out there, we're really focused on those two aspects as of right now. But research is amazing, and we do have a research team that's looking at other modalities as well.
Okay. And do you partner with other clinics? Like if these veterans, want to, because the issue we have with the brain is we really don't know how to treat the brain. All we can do is just give it as much of a challenge as we can give it and try to help it heal. So do you work with or partner with other service providers that you can refer veterans to if they want to try these other modalities to continue to improve their health? Because once they leave your care, if they're not local, then basically their access to that care when they go back is over, right?
Correct. Yeah. So we do have a case management team and a alumni program as well. So the alumni
Okay.
program, we offer that, on a hybrid model. So for those that are local, they can come in person. We share a meal. We go over some more, treatment modalities, check-ins, those type of things. But then, for those that are, maybe out of state or too far of a drive, we offer that virtually as well. So they can continue
Okay.
to have access to our clinic, really for the life of the program. Now, in regards to, follow-on care, because we are, obviously an intensive outpatient program, we're focused on that 3-week model and then sending them back into the community. We have a phenomenal case management team that tailors their needs based on whatever it is that's going on in their life. And so the clinical team comes together and, in their discharge plan, which I know some of those can be pretty daunting, they actually make it really easy to read in just a couple of papers and everybody is sent home. With that, but in their case management folder, and they meet multiple times throughout the IOP, and then also during the 3-day evaluation as well. But during that time frame, we're figuring out exactly what their needs are. It can be anything from like financial to recreational to maybe continuation of care through a clinical. And so we do a lot of assessing, and then giving all that information over to the veteran. Now it's up to them to be able to reach out to them, but we have quite a few collaborative or I want to say these partners. I'm going to be careful of that. University of Florida might be upset, but we do collaborate with so many different organizations in order to be able to have that, that continuation of care. Because, what's great about these programs is that they're able to really get you to a point where we're improving their life. But if they don't keep up with that, just like going to the gym, if you don't keep working on those muscles, you're going to go right back to where you were before. And so we, that case management team really is pivotal in our program.
Okay. So if they do get, if they do good at equine therapy, they have to go buy a horse when they go back to, they have
No,
to
no.
move to the country.
I
No.
mean, if they
Yeah.
have the space, absolutely. No, we
Yeah. Go find a
actually,
horse, right?
right.
No,
Um,
and that's the point that we're trying to make is we do not have a scalable approach to brain health right now. Like it's all, it's all specialist and specialized training that is not something that you can find in the, outside, in rural country or even in larger cities. There's these, small networks of clinics. Now, and why is brain specialized healthcare when we have such an enormous TBI issue? Like we have 2.8 million TBIs in America a year, right? We've got over 60,000 dead veterans. Okay. None of them that, in our opinion, have been assessed for their brain health and the impact on their careers. We still have to address that issue. And yet we find that our suicide rates are not dropping because we personally feel in some cases is that we're not looking at brain health. We're not associating brain health with mental illness and mental illness with suicide. We're doing the mental illness and suicide thing, but we're treating mental illness in outpatient with therapy and drugs. And a lot of these people aren't finding you. I mean, what's your throughput a month? How many veterans are you seeing a month, new veterans?
So we have the capacity for, about 110 maybe at our clinic for the IOP. Because we have our 3-day assessment. That's
Right.
constant. I think there's only a handful of weeks in the entire year, like around Christmas and Thanksgiving and such, that we're not seeing anybody in clinic, and that's our admin time. But we have a pretty steady, sense of veterans and first responders coming through our program. And so I think, and I'll have to sit there and check on the numbers, but I want to say it's like close to 250 or 300 that we have through our doors through our 3-week or for our 3-day evaluation. And then that IOP, it's very specialized, and we keep them in smaller cohorts. So they have a way to be, and I say smaller, about 10 veterans per cohort can come through and get treated, and it's 3 weeks. It's once a month. That we're seeing these individuals. And so, for us, and I get it a lot, what's great about, working under the Avalon Action Alliance is that we're one of 7 clinics in the nation, and we're growing. So Bernie Marcus and Arthur Blank, they're the founders of Home Depot. They're the ones that really kind of brought us all together, and their vision, and late Bernie Marcus, their vision was to have a clinic in every state. And that's what we're working on, we're working on having a TBI clinic specialized with veterans and first responders, meaning our providers are specially trained, to understand, some of the challenges that are, that community faces, and so, we're able to really target, specifically that audience. And as for like how people are hearing about us, a lot of it's word of mouth, but our community engagement, going to events, the problem is a lot of veterans that are really needing our services, they self-isolate, they're staying at home, or maybe they're working full time, they have families, so they work, they go home, they cook dinner, they go to bed, and they do it all over again. And then weekends, they're going to little Johnny or Susie's soccer practice or, whatnot. So, it's really hard to get in front of some of these individuals that could really benefit from our service. And so, doing podcasts and online marketing is really been helpful in getting people to us. And if our wait times get, pretty long, we have a network that we could sit there and refer to. So, we partnered with, right now, like I said, 6 other TBI clinics. And if our numbers get low, we'll refer over to them. So there's not going to be a long wait list for our community.
No, and that's the point, is that there shouldn't be a wait list, right? And it's not your job to address the entire veteran population. These, brain health is not part of any, it's starting to be. But if you look at all the veterans that have left the service in the last 20 years of war and before that, when I left, nobody talked about brain health, right? Nobody talked about, hey, have you had TBIs? Man, I've been shot in the face. That's why I'm so ugly. I've been blown, I've been around so many explosions. I've woken up, unconscious on so many rugby fields as a military rugby player, right? It's like, yeah, I've had some, I didn't even know what a TBI was, right? And so I'm like, all right, how do we, and how do we scale this? And this is, number one, I'd love to know more about the Avalon Alliance and your founders there. And because we have a concept for a larger, program, right? A program, a record that needs a lot of attention right now. But the number one gap that we're trying to fill is, number one, is awareness, right? Do I have a problem? And then awareness and education in the military side, because the specific treatments that you provide should not be unique just to your organization, right? This should be part of any hospital that, because TBI is TBI. And with the VA, we shouldn't just have TBI centers. We should have, the VA should be aware of this. Like, I go to my clinic here in Bradenton, Florida, TBI, right? They know of it, but they have no idea. They don't say, I go in there, it's like, right, man, how's your libido? How's your health? What's your cholesterol? Hey, you're going to ask me about brain health? And my doctor looks at me, why would I ask you about brain health? I'm like, well, I've been in 4 different combat zones, bro. Just kind of wondered, because, but to your point, you shouldn't have to scale. Let me throw another question in there. So psychedelics, okay, psychedelics is a very, very big part of the fringe of or the frontier, I think, of healthcare. We are seeing, especially people in very, very acute stages of suicidal ideation, or very, very pronounced mental illness in forms of very, very deep depression, whatever, that we're seeing significant improvements with the use of psychedelics. How do you, as obviously something that you do not, it's not one of the modalities you leverage. Do you refer out, or how does you personally, how do you feel about it, or how does how do we get? Is there any interaction on the psychedelics from your organization? Do you refer out to clinics, or where veterans are beyond the needs right now? They're like they're just at the end of the rope. So what do you think?
Yeah, so man, I wish our medical director was still here. So he was actually a Dixon psychiatrist, and years and years in the military as a pilot, and then he ended up becoming a psychiatrist for the Army. And so, he's able to really sit there and hone in on this conversation. Officially, our clinic obviously doesn't, do anything with psychedelics. Now, we do have quite a few veterans coming through our programming, and they sit there and they talk about how psychedelics has impacted them. We obviously encourage that conversation. Now, from that stance, I really can't talk about it from a official capacity, but from my personal, stance, I did the stellate ganglion block, and that changed my life. I thought, I was just kind of going through like downward spiral, and being able to pair that with an evidence-based treatment. Complete game changer. I went from, having, flashbacks and nightmares and, all sorts of different things, really impacting my quality of life, to not having nearly any. Especially immediately following, my injection. I was a completely different person. I can't sit there and say enough about it. And I know that Dr. Lipove out in Chicago, he's done a lot of work.
He did mine too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's fantastic. Yeah. I absolutely adore him. But like for them, like he and Shauna Springer out in California, she's a big advocate for it. And so I know for me personally, and quite a few veterans, we can sit there and have those conversations, offhand. I'd be like, hey, it saved my life. Officially, University of Florida is probably going to, sit there and, I'd be like, what the heck, Ashton? But, I will say it is a game changer. And I think that should be something that, a lot of providers should be looking at. I know Rush University Medical Center in Chicago, they've done some trials with SGB, and pairing it with like 1 week of CPT. And they saw some really, really promising results. So it's becoming more prevalent in the medical community. I think there's that word stigma. There is that stigma. Yeah. So I think if used correctly and under the guidance of a doctor, I think it can revolutionize the the brain health, and the TBI world. Same thing with post-traumatic stress as well.
Oh, and that's where I think SGBs come in. And for for our audience, stellate ganglion blocks is an outpatient procedure where they basically lidocaine the ganglion nerve centers on both sides of your neck, one side or both sides, depending on the perceived level of trauma. This is not a psychedelic, not a psychedelic treatment. It's sometimes done in conjunction with ketamine or other psychedelic treatments. But basically, it allows a veteran that's been exposed, and first responders, to a lot of fight or flight. Like, you're turned on. We see this with our NFL players, where you're hyper vigilant, you're turned on all the time. Your fight or flight mechanism has never been shut. So we're seeing people like Ashton and myself that have decades of being turned on, finally being able to relax, because this procedure shuts that fight or flight mechanism down. It's been used successfully with a lot of first responders, a lot of special operations people. So we do see that's one of those operations that's coming into the mainstream, along with, the utilization of psychedelics, that, when we have, people that are not responding to CBT or equine therapy or other, we have to. That's what we're looking at, opening up open up our blinders here, because for your organization, Ashton, to partner with other organizations, that's part of opening these blinders. What do you have? Because in the end, we have a veteran that's hurting, and if I can't help them with what I got, what can you do for them? And it's not like, it's not insulated, right? We
Mhm.
are a community, and for you to be able to refer out and work with other providers and have that open approach to mental health is so powerful and very, very compelling. So tell us a little bit more. How do people find you? Let's dive into the Avalon here as we close out. Right? How do people get a hold of you? Let's talk about this. So first, what are the symptoms? Right? So say I'm a wife, right? Or a husband of a spouse who's been in the military. Like I got married after I left the Army after 21 years, right? How do I know if my loved one is struggling? Say they've been in the, I've talked to so many wives, that, I knew my husband was a master breacher. He got blown up. I talked, and like they drag him over. It's like, you need to talk to him, right? Because once you start explaining what these symptoms are, they might think it's them. Hey, I'm ugly, or you don't like me no more, or or you're an alcoholic. And no, it's up here, man. So educate our audience on on TBI related symptoms, so they can understand that sometimes it's not their childhood, it's not the fact that they saw bodies, or it could be that they saw dead bodies, but these are some of the symptoms that you should be watching out for. And then how do they find you so they can get evaluated, diagnosed, and treated?
Absolutely. Now, I will say for the spouses or the significant others or those that are not the veteran, all right, if any of these kind of come up, don't be sitting there immediately going over to your veteran being like, I heard Ashton and Bruce sitting there talking, and that's not what I'm doing. This is just the education, all right?
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
and then,
Good.
for
Good
those that
segue.
have had injuries, like, hey, if some of these are, on your, like, kind of things that you're, getting plagued with, like, know that there's treatment for you. You do not have to live like this. For the longest time, I thought that this was normal about being in the military. Like, oh yeah, my body's going to just mess up and I'm going to have to live with it. No, you don't. So with that being said, probably the biggest one that I get is sleep disturbance. That is hands down. Everybody's always talking about, I have really poor sleep. That noise sensitivity as well, especially those that have young kids, and they have the TV up a little loud, or maybe like that just high pitched noise, and all of a sudden you got that tinnitus going on. That noise sensitivity is really a big thing that we hear. But then you go into like the anxiety, the depression, maybe some forgetfulness, headaches. Headaches are very, very common. And then you can look at like coordination difficulties, if you're having difficulty balancing, that nausea, light sensitivity. I should have probably said that one as well. Light sensitivity is huge. If you're having to constantly have the lights dimmed in the office, that's a big one. And then slow thinking. If you have a hard time being able to remember that word, it's like, crap, what am I looking, what am I sitting there trying to remember? These are all things that are treatable, and you don't have to sit there and just constantly live like this. So if any of those are yours, and that's not an exhaustive list, those are just the most common ones that we see in our clinic. But if this is something that you're, kind of getting plagued with, I would reach out to the Avalon Action Alliance. So you can just Google AVALON Action Alliance. And it'll bring you to, our homepage. And like I said, I'm one of 7 TBI clinics. And I know that, Bruce, you have a very far-reaching community. So they see veterans all across the nation, Puerto Rico, just all over. And what they're doing is they're reducing those barriers into care. So if you're having difficulty with like your insurance, that's not a problem. Airfare, lodging, food, all of that is going to be covered under a grant. So all you have to do is be able to just Google, go online and say, hey, I'm having these, difficulties. And then somebody from one of the clinics will give you a call. It's usually based on your geographic location. And then, it starts the process. It's a self-referral process. So, again, that's Avalon Action Alliance. If you're specifically wanting to come see me in my clinic, you can just give us a call. And that number is 904-244-3289. Again, that's 904-244-3289. And this is just, like I said, it's so easy to be able to get help. And for me, speaking from somebody that has experience that, came very close to, basically losing their family over just these issues that are easily
Fixable,
treatable.
treatable.
Yeah,
Right.
they're
Yeah.
treatable. I'm not going to say you're going to get cured, but can you get treated so you can have a better quality of life? I mean, why wouldn't you?
And
What's stopping you?
And can you get diagnosed where you understand that these issues are not you going crazy? They're the result of your military service, or it could be result those dang horses cause, like, they're the third leading cause of concussions in America. A lot of people don't know
Yep.
that, right? I mean, more people go to hospitals because of these darn horses than anything. But it's
They're
why
so
we don't
fun.
ride them in the Army anymore, right? But that's the whole point, is that a lot of our veterans are suffering in silence, and therefore their families are suffering in silence because of how we impact our families. And in the end, you've done nothing wrong. You volunteered to serve your country. You trained for combat. You went in combat. We owe you. Okay, we owe you help. We owe you coverage. We owe you treatment and disability in some cases as well, because we're now understanding the impact of these long-term exposures to blast exposure, to combat, and then the trauma that goes with being turned on for decades on end. And then you come out here in the real world, and everybody's like, well, how come you're not normal? How come you don't act like a regular civilian? It's like, well, dude, and you're supposed to, otherwise you're going to go to jail.
Regular.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not normal, man. But no, I really thank you for your time, Ashton. I mean, this is amazing. I mean, I think that what you're doing out there at the Avalon Alliance, how you putting, your injuries to work, how you're giving back to our veteran community is amazing. I thank you for it. And I thank you for your self-service and your service to this country. And we will continue to be in touch, of course. And even, Marine Corps notwithstanding there, just always got to throw that one in there. But no, we love our Marines, and nobody's prouder of their service than the Marine Corps, that's for sure. So I wish you a Merry Christmas, a happy holiday season. And for everybody left, before we go, don't forget, Youth Contact Sports and Broken Brains, free book on the website. Go get it, read it, 88 pages. You'll be more informed than any doctor, psychiatrist in this country on the issue of repetitive impacts. And we're coming out with a guide for veterans for repetitive blast exposure, which is we're starting to drive a lot of awareness to that issue. And it's because of people like Ashton we're able to get there. Ashton, thanks again for your time on the podcast. Folks, thank you so much for another wonderful episode of Broken Brains. Can't wait to see you soon. Take care.